Welcome to episode 3 of Ember Episodes. This is our weekly podcast where we discuss all things DeFi, as well as our digital agency token and our commitment to being a light in the dark alleys of crypto. My name is JR. I'm the CEO and co founder of Ember, and I will be your host today. I am joined by David Hunter, the one and only of Blockstar. David is an advisor on our team and a well-respected developer in the DeFi space. We are going to be talking about all things blockchain today. This episode is titled Everything Blockchain, Grow Your Knowledge on DeFi. We're going to talk about David's experience, where he comes from, what got him into the space, and ultimately where he is going to be taking Blockstar and where he sees blockchain going in the future. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the one and only David Hunter. And David, if you don't mind, just give us a little bit of a background, how you got into the space, were you always in DeFi? How early were you in it? And, what ramped you up to where you are today?
Yeah, thanks, Jar. Thanks for the introduction. We're going to have to work on that, though. It's supposed to be the man, the myth, the legend, right? Yeah, thanks, Jar, for the introduction. My name is David Hunter. I am a blockchain advisor for Ember. I've been in the space, depending on who you ask. If you want to go back to the Bitcoin days, well, I've been here since Bitcoin. But truly, I've been here since, if any of you guys remember DigiCash and eCash and BitGold, which were the predecessors to Bitcoin. Bitcoin's really the coin that brought things into the mainstream, into the light for a lot of people. So that's really what people remember. So if we want to go back to then, we're looking a little over 13 years ago. So um, how did I get into crypto? Everybody asks me that. Well, to answer that question, we have to go back a little bit further before that and everything. I've always been involved in cryptography, and even as a young child and everything, dealing with electronics and software. I kind of grew up in the right era when the home computer was really just getting started because they were just so expensive. I can remember back when I was 8, 9 years old. A home computer was in the thousands, not the a few hundreds. Now we have laptops, and you pretty much have a phone that you carry around with you on your side every single day. That you can get for a matter of 50 to $100. Unless you're an iOS user, and then we'll get into that later when we start talking about blockchain and how it integrates throughout. But for the most of you guys, a lot of you guys know me. I've been in this space for a very, very long time. Crypto was kind of tailor made for me, and I always sound like I'm bragging on myself, but I think it to provide the context on where I started to how I got to where I am in this space, and how I really developed myself as a person and the companies that I built throughout the space. I think it's very important for me to explain those things. So being in the Navy and everything, I ran off to the Navy at 17 years old, graduated a 3-year honor grad. I went into the advanced electronic computer field. I decided I didn't want to be an FC and spend 6 months at a time on a submarine because, I just didn't like hanging out with a bunch of guys underwater for 6 months at a time. So I went to the advanced electronic computer side of things. And there I did a lot of stuff. I used to travel around all over the world. I've been to pretty much everywhere in the States at least twice. But I used to work on a lot of satellite towers and developing, software and hardware side of things as well. I used to work on, billions of dollars of equipment. When I got out of the military, I went to work for a company called US Tech, working on $20 set top boxes. And come to find out, everybody there was making more money than I was. And, I asked my boss for a raise one day, and he said no. He said, as it's union around here, everybody pretty much makes the same. And, the longer you're here, the more money you make. Well, that didn't really set well with me. I said, well, it's hard for me not to ask for a raise when everybody's coming and asking me all the questions on how to do these things. And they said, well, they have more experience than you do. And I said, it's kind of hard to say they have more experience when I spent the last 6 years of my life working on, again, billions of dollars of equipment, not those $20 set top boxes. So I met a gentleman. I won't mention his name on here, but I met a gentleman named, um, I was sitting at a bar called Wings and More. We were hanging out and everything. He said I should come work for him. I told him it was crazy. Absolutely not. After I asked him what he did, he said he was in the sales industry. I am not a salesperson. I always told everybody there's no way I can't sell nothing to anybody, right? So he kept on and kept on. And then eventually, throughout our conversation, over the next several months, he said, David, seriously, you should come, just try it out, take some vacation time. He said, if it doesn't work out, you have nothing to lose. So that's exactly what I did. I went and for those in sales industry and worked for a company called US our Quit Home Inspiration. And then I went on to replace him 6 months later, and then went on to become the regional vice president of that company. And lo and behold, I was very good at it. I was a very personable person. So I went on to actually teach salespeople. I used to teach seminars, and I still maintain doing, electronics and software and development, but it was more of a hobby at that point. I really got into the business side of things because while I was in the Navy, I also got my degree in business. So I was passionate about business, but not the sales side of it. He was the owner of a string chemical company, and he used to go around, and they had a big firm on the back end of that would go around and buy up either, slow growth or non-profitable business. And I would go through and I would restructure them and make them profitable. We would either keep them or sell them. Long story short, many years later, own company, and now I have one of the largest companies in the U.S. as a consulting company, and that's exactly what we do outside of, or I should say, I do outside of crypto is consult other businesses on how to be profitable and how to restructure the profitable. So when I say that crypto was tailor made for me, it really was, because you really need to have that mindset of being able to do the front end. I know this is a lot about blockchain and everything, but I think it's important just to get a background on me from the business side, and for that reason, right? From the cryptography side of it. So fast forward many years later, a lot of you guys may know me through Ethereum push notifications, charged particles, some of the top projects within inside of the crypto space. I've advised on a lot of other projects as well. About 4 years ago, I decided to build out a company called Blockstar. Many of you guys have probably heard that, or at least on your radar. It is the first decentralized social media platform ever built on blockchain that is truly decentralized, not just sitting on a server somewhere. It is built throughout nodes so that it will always be there. We're never governed by a particular space. So if I would have told everybody 4 years ago I was going to build the next social media platform that would be able to compete with some of the big boys like Facebook, Twitter, and all those other ones that you guys so famously use all the time, and even TikTok, people would have thought I was crazy. So it took me about 4 years. There's over 1 million lines of code just on the social platform itself. And then obviously we have the staking platform. And this isn't really supposed to be about Blockstar as a ecosystem. Just it gives you a little bit of background as far as the experience and the amount of work and everything that I've done inside of the space. So I know you probably have a lot of questions about blockchain kind of in its simplest form. And I think it'd be very important for us to get into some of those. So I'm just going to jump right in. I know you probably got some other questions, but I'll kind of give a background, just kind of what blockchain is. Blockchain is in its simplest form is a chain of blocks that are put together in transactions, right? And it's a consensus model. So to for everybody out there, I'm going to try to explain it to like I was explaining to a child or a fifth grader, right? To make it very, very simple. If you're new to DeFi or you're new to the crypto space, and being able to understand what blockchain is. So blockchain is a group of transactions. It's a consensus model that where people can come in and they can start making transactions. So inside of that block, it is a bunch of data, and those data are basically on a ledger. It's a consensus ledger, and inside of that ledger, it has a bunch of different transactions that just have a bunch of numbers, ones, or maybe it has information or data attached to it. So let's say that each block holds 100 different hashes, right? Or 100 different lines of code, right? So then once it gets to that 100, then it creates another chain, right? So the reason it's called a consensus model is because it's on a ledger. So let's say that there is 100 different ledgers out there, right? And then obviously in the crypto space, there's millions of these things. So it's one ledger that is disputed or distributed among all of these people. And at the end of that block, everybody inside of that ledger that has that ledger, the same copy, it all needs to match. If it doesn't match, it gets thrown out and the majority rules, right? So the majority. So now we move into block number 2, and the same thing happens over and over and over and over again. A lot of you guys may remember when Bitcoin first came out, for one single consensus transaction, right? One block was, when people would mine, would be worth 50 Bitcoin. I know that's hard for some of you guys to believe, especially at today's prices, and even in the last bull run when we were talking about, $70,000 Bitcoin. But it used to be 50 Bitcoin per block in mining power. So I think that's pretty extraordinary. And every 4 years we do the halving and everything, and that gets cut in half. So it went to 25, and then went to 50, and it just keeps getting smaller and smaller until we run out of Bitcoin. And there's plenty of Google searches you guys can do out there to see at each halving what that narrows down to. But it's literally called a halving because it splits. So just to jump in just to the blockchain side of it, that's exactly what it is. It's just a distributed ledger and everything. It's a consensus model, and everybody shares the same ledger, and they have to match. If they don't, they get kicked out of the system, and then it just carries on to the next block. So what that means for what we're able to do now with inside a blockchain, now that we have a consensus and we can take data, we can put it on there, and that takes us outside of the bank. So I don't know how much we want to get into centralized banking and all that stuff, but I just think it's important to know what the basis of a blockchain is, and it's chains that link together. And at the end of the day, they all have to match.
Yeah, no, I mean it's fascinating because like when you look at traditional, data structures, you look at traditional, methods and like technology philosophies, on how businesses are built or how data is communicated or how contracts are written. This becomes like a hub for all those things, right? It's a way to communicate. It's a way to have contracts. It's a way to, to provide a baseline for technology to be built upon. And my question is, with your experience in it, like when did it really start? For those that might be listening, like when did it really start? Not become mainstream, but start to be leveraged? Was there ever like this launching point of blockchain that you know of, where it was like the first like real introduction, and really how, if you have any history on it, not that you're the inventor of it, but I know you obviously have a big background in it. How was it brought to life, and where did it kind of come from?
If you're talking about blockchain in general, let me make sure I'm not on mute here. If you're talking about blockchain in
Hmm.
general, everybody talks about Satoshi Nakamoto and everything. But there was another guy before that. Obviously, Satoshi's the one that got famous and everything because it was put out in forums. I can actually remember back in the early days and everything. And when I say early days, I'm talking about, 13, 14 years ago, where blockchain really was in its infancy stage. And I still feel like we're a 2-year-old toddler at this point in crypto. And I'll go into a little bit more of that later. But there were no people sitting around on Telegram and having, chats, or being able to go to YouTube and look up, what is blockchain and all that. Everything was done in forums, and that whole abstract of the thesis behind Bitcoin was put out anonymously by, a figure that nobody actually really knows what that person looks like. They just know it by that name, right? Satoshi Nakamoto.
Right,
Um,
right.
so when you talk about the early days, I think it's very, very important to look at where it was when that thesis was put out, and then people really started looking at it and thinking of different ways that this can be implemented. Right? I
Hmm.
know you guys have heard about the $10,000 two extra large pizzas and everything that were sold, but back in the early days, people didn't know what Bitcoin was going to do, and even then, if you can imagine, we didn't have MetaMask, we didn't have trust wallets and all that stuff. Everything
Right,
was done directly into a hard drive, right? And most of those people, when Bitcoin is worth, a penny, 3 pennies, you know, people weren't keeping up with it today.
right.
Obviously, if they would have known that, Bitcoin would have got to the masses at now and then continues to grow, and then the crypto space would have grown into what it is today. Obviously, they would have taken a little better care of that stuff, right?
Hmm.
Um, but I think it's very important to know when, at least for me, where I seen the difference. It wasn't necessarily with Bitcoin. It was really started taking off when it went from Bitcoin and then Ethereum was introduced, right? So
Interesting.
for me, when Ethereum came into it, it changed everything,
And you have
right?
some experience on that side of it, right?
I do have some experience on that side of it. So specifically when Ethereum came out, it gave us the ability to start doing smart contracts, right?
Mm.
So with smart contracts, that means they're programmable. So all that information that we're talking about on blocks 1, 2, and 3 from a blockchain standpoint, just because it's secure, anonymous, it's unanimous, and like I said, they do have the epoch times. So there is
Mhm.
a timestamp, and it really makes them immutable, right? So those blocks, they don't get to change. You always have a history or a timeline you can go back to and see everything that happened inside that block. That's why it's recorded on blockchain, because it doesn't change. It's immutable. So being able to introduce a smart contract now that we can program and to
Mhm.
be able to do different things, I think again we are still at the infancy stage of what blockchain is going to be in the future, right? So if
Right.
you just think of from like an inventory control standpoint, right? Being able to, how many times do things get lost in inventory, or it doesn't match at the end of the day? You're supposed to have
Right.
three in inventory and you only really have one.
Right.
Well, again, blockchain is immutable and be able to program those things. So a lot of the stuff that we're going to be using blockchain for is not necessarily inside of the crypto space. So that's where mainstream adoption really comes in. But to go back to the Ethereum part of it,
Mhm.
I think it's very, very important. That is, in my opinion, when crypto really started to scale, right? So when you start introducing another currency now that you can add onto that, and now people can create their own projects, their own token, that's when we really started seeing the buzz around crypto. It wasn't necessarily in the early days of just Bitcoin. It was just a bunch of computer nerds and geeks, and I'll put myself in that category because I was super interested in that stuff just because it was so new, right?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously having a background in cryptography from the Navy and all that stuff, I was already familiar with the programming languages and how to construct those things and to be able
Right.
to build off of that. So again, with the introduction of Ethereum, it changed the whole crypto landscape. And again, I think we're still in the toddler phase of what crypto is going to be in the next 10, 15, 20 years from now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. So, like when you think about characteristics of blockchain compared to like traditional technology, what are your three like favorite pieces of it? That would contrast to a traditional technologist way of thinking, like on whether it's communication, data processing, whatever. What are your three? What would be two to three of your favorite things about blockchain that you feel are going to pave the way in the future compared to how businesses are traditionally leveraging technology right now?
Absolutely. So the number one thing for me is the programmability of it, right? So
Mm,
being able to program again these different smart contracts. But the other thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is the scalability, and I'll give you an example of that. So when you go into a convenience store, if you guys can remember many years ago, even up to probably the last few years, right?
mhm.
You would go in, you would make a credit card transaction. For those that we went from checks into the credit card system. So this is just the next evolution is blockchain, and not necessarily just cryptocurrency, but that is one of them, right? But blockchain in general. But you would put your credit card in, you had to wait for it to dial up and all that stuff, go through its transaction, and those transactions could take anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds to process one transaction, right? And I think a lot of you guys that, when you're moving money around from outside of crypto through an exchange and bringing it on board, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 days to be able to secure that transaction and see that it went all the way through and you have access to those funds. Well,
Right.
blockchain changes that because, again, it's secure and it's immutable, and you can do millions of transactions every single second.
It's amazing.
That's used for scalability, especially for companies, right? So when you start talking about even like Visa, MasterCard, and other credit card companies, just being able to process transactions faster,
Mhm.
even through banks and everything, instead of doing ACH transfers, that is going to be a thing of the past. That is super outdated technology when the technology today exists, right?
Mhm.
With blockchain to be able to do these things in the matter of seconds, right? So think about that for the people, especially bigger companies that are ordering or they're international companies.
Right.
And I'll just give you an example. We'll think of like pipelines and stuff like that. They need to go order another order of pipes, and it's somewhere setting over in Germany or Europe or somewhere like that, and they need it 800 miles away. Well, now you got to wait for that payment to process and everything, and then inventory to get pulled. This is all done instantaneously, right?
Wow.
There is nothing to go back. And again, it's immutable because it is on that distributor ledger, which again has that timestamp and is secure, right? And how many times have we heard where information's got stolen and hacked and all that stuff, or information
Mhm.
was lost? Well, blockchain eliminates almost every single one of those things,
Mm.
right? So when you hear about different servers like Facebook and all that stuff, and all the other companies out there, a few years ago, Target, where their website was hacked by DNS hits and everything, blockchain changes a lot of that stuff because you don't necessarily have to have a server setting somewhere because it's all distributed it and you're just displaying that stuff on the front end. But all the stuff that
Mhm.
happens on millions of computers, and that's what makes up our blockchain, right? So that information is never gone because again, it's immutable. How many times have we seen big data losses across companies? I was
Mhm.
just talking to a gentleman the other day that was using a hosting provider. He had his own dedicated server, super excited about it. It was a new business that they had just started, but they had their inventory and everything that was sitting on another hosting provider that they have been keeping track of and ran their whole business on for the last 3 years. When they're upgrading and doing a new brand refresh and everything, they lost every piece of that data because the file was corrupt on the backup when they got ready to move. How cool would it have been had it been built on, blockchain and nodes and everything, just to go back and get a snapshot of that? So again, not does it just make it more efficient, right? But again, for the scalability for companies and keeping all of their information secure, and being able to go back in history and in time and be able to pull that information back off of there as well. And another point, when you have a distributed ledger or you have nodes in an ecosystem where things are spread out all over the world, let's say there's a tsunami that comes through and knocks out, a big hosting company somewhere, and if you just had one or two servers there, well, guess what? You've lost everything, right? But with a node system, it's very similar to the way the blocks in a blockchain work, because if it can't pull from one node, then it'll go to the next one and pull from that. And usually when you're inside of that ecosystem, it's going to pull whatever one is closest to you anyway, right? So that way it's making that deliverable of information to you much quicker, right? So I think we're going to see, I'm sure you guys are familiar when we went from Cat 5 to Cat 6 to fiber and all that, and how fast networks got. Blockchain makes it even that much faster as well.
What do you think that impact's going to have on on businesses that are I mean, obviously it's going to go faster. Is there any limitations you see with with speed, and how will that affect the downtime some of these businesses are used to having, right? Like, as they, whether it's finance or pharmaceutical or whatever, if it's like this known downtime to transfer funds or what have you, is there going to be a drawback to businesses for things moving faster? In other words, having to keep up with it more and more by having more personnel because transactions are moving quicker in the future. Like, is there any concept of that, or do you think it's just going to improve efficiency?
It's going to improve efficiency, and it's going to streamline a lot of businesses, right? I know this is kind of touchy subject, but it actually scales down the amount of people needed, right? To be able to run a company as well, right? Because a lot of this stuff can be programmed and automated. But on the flip side of that, you're always going to need developers and people in the IT sector, and you're still going to have lots of employment out there. It's just going to look different. The whole landscape is going to look different for a lot of businesses. But you also have to remember, not just the ability to scale, right, and just have fast transactions, but the ability to also scale down cost, right. And I think that's a big thing for a lot of companies that are looking, to scale and open up new employment for other people. That it's hard for them to do that, especially right now with the markets the way that they are in general around the world, right? So it's really, really hard. So being able to streamline those processes, and it gives the companies the ability to expand. And then you have, some local mom and pop shops that really should be international companies. They just don't have the ability to scale, and this changes and levels the playing field for everybody, especially with blockchain technology, right? Because in the past, and I'm sure most of you guys have probably heard stories or news headlines about this, but it used to be a pay to play, right? So when you got a hosting provider and everything, even on shared servers or VPSs or whatever, you would get bandwidth from not just the hosting company, but the internet service providers too, right? They would limit you, but then your competitor may pay a little extra money and they get all the bandwidth. So they were able to deliver the front end a lot faster, right? Well, that makes a big difference in a business. Well, blockchain levels that playing field because everything is done on distributor ledgers across everybody that takes part in that blockchain or that distributor ledger system. So as blockchain in general, and along with the crypto industry, as it scales, well, that also scales the ability for a lot of these other companies to scale too. So if you're one of those guys out there, you're young or just getting started or trying to figure out what you want to do in school, my recommendation is look into the IT field. And if you want to know, what programming languages, could I get this asked every single day? Should I go learn JavaScript, PHP? I would start learning Solidity, because I really do think that's the future, not just a blockchain in that industry, but for other industries out there as well. They're going to be looking for those blockchain developers, right? Specifically in Solidity. And if you're one of those guys that already know JavaScript and all that stuff, it should be a very, very easy transition for you to go over to Solidity.
So that's interesting. One last question on the, on that front. When you think about the job market, like, you look in the economy, today, right now, it's garbage. I mean, the global economy sucks in general.
Sure does.
When you look at the the job, the job economy right now, and the workforce, and unemployment, things like that, you feel like as things progress and as blockchain's more adopted, you think this will have a big impact on the job market, or do you think it's going to be very, very selective, where it's almost, how doctors and lawyers are, right? It's just there's a very finite, amount of people that focus in that industry? Do you feel like it's going to be more mass adopted to help improve the job numbers out there over time?
Absolutely. So I think it's going to be more mass adopted. And what I mean by
Mhm.
that, just because you got some guy sitting in a back room creating the smart contracts and programmable contracts to be able to work on this side of a business, you still need people that can work the front end, right? So I'll give you an example for like factory workers and everything. We're still going to need factory. We still have
Mhm.
to build stuff, right? But we're able to move efficiently to be able to streamline those products being out. I know right now we have a big problem with shipping delays and all that stuff, and even manufacturers are having a very, very tough time. Now I know a lot of that comes to ships sitting out in the harbors and stuff like that, but in a manufacturing, customers will be able to track their entire order using blockchain from the time that they place the order all the way down an assembly line
Wow.
all the way back to their door, right from the time that they order. So there's still going to be a place for everybody inside of that ecosystem, not just contract developers and people that know blockchain. But I think that's a great start if you're somebody young that's looking for that. But as a whole, it's only going to make things more efficient. Yes, some companies are going to be able to scale down their workforce, right?
Mhm.
Because it's streamlined, but you're also going to have better paying jobs as well, right? Because they're going to be more technical jobs.
Right.
But there's
Right.
still going to be a need for all of those people in the workplace.
Very cool. That's cool. So like outside of the business side, if you're a consumer listening in, right? Like maybe you're not looking to get in the industry,
Sure.
you're not looking to become a developer, you're not looking to launch a product, DeFi, or leverage it for a small or even a mid-sized business. When you think of like a consumer, what's their impact? Like where is a consumer, and is there like an open door for consumer to leverage this? Like, is it really going to be
Absolutely.
driven by this, or where does the consumer fit into this outside of just investing into DeFi?
Absolutely. So when we start talking about DeFi, that's really a different ball game than just
Mhm.
blockchain in general,
Sure.
right? And I'm happy to get into DeFi, but I think that would be a great new opening to another segue
Okay.
on a different podcast.
Sure.
But for blockchain in general, what does that mean for the consumer? With the ability to scale things for a business, will that translate automatically to the pricing of stuff as well for the consumer, right?
Hmm.
And then also being able to leverage different markets. I know some of you guys have heard me talk about cell phones and stuff like that as well. Well, being able to not have those high, cell phones where you're paying $100 to $200 a month for cell service when everything can be done literally on the blockchain, right?
So
So being able to set up those networks, everything's just going to run so much faster, so much smoother. You're not going to have it, as many hacks now. I know a lot of people talking, crypto with smart contracts. Are things, hackable? There's always going to be people out there that are bad actors in the space. But the
mhm.
more adoption that we have in the space and with smart contracts and blockchain, the more that we're able to combat that as a whole, right?
Sure.
And having everything open source where people can come in and learn, and then we can fight against that as a whole, right? But there's no industry out there that is protected from that, right? There's always going to
Right.
be exploits of some kind.
Sure.
But for the consumer itself, things are just going to get cheaper, right? Just
Hmm.
because they're able to be not micromanaged anymore. It's just a streamlined process, and it's just going to get simpler.
Very, very cool. That's awesome. Um, with the speed of blockchain, it's just a personal question, actually. So the speed of blockchain, when you think of like, and I know even Web3 is a whole different discussion we can have on another podcast sometime.
Sure.
When you think about games, right? Like you think of the speed of games, like people naturally think, oh, well, how fast is your internet? Are you lagging because you have low bandwidth, or your loss of packets, or whatever it is, right? All
Right.
the tech terms of internet bandwidth and speed. When you think about online games and that are maybe built on chain like that, is there, how does that speed play into it, given the way that it's developed? Does that have any impact? Does blockchain have any impact from a consumer level on online games?
Absolutely. So when you start talking about games, and I'll even mention out a couple of, I know a lot of you guys have heard me talk about Gala games that are built on nodes and everything. Well, the
Hmm.
way that ecosystem works is the bandwidth actually comes from the players. So if you're playing, I'm playing, and all these people, the more people play in the game, the faster the ecosystem becomes, right? And the reason is because on blockchain, it's taking resources from everybody and distributing that resource, and it makes it faster. You would normally think that it would slow down. The more people playing a game, the slower it would become. Well, blockchain is the opposite effect. because the more people that are playing, it provides more resources for the entire network. So everything is going to get much, much faster. And that's what I mean for the end user, the consumer. Things are going to be a lot faster. We're already in a fast-paced environment now compared to what we were 20 years ago. It is going to be tenfold that over the next 10 years.
That's
And
really fascinating.
if we think about, just computers in general, right?
Mm.
And being able to connect, I can see a future where literally everybody's just interconnected already. Now, does that mean that you're going to, give up sensitive information? I don't think so, right? Because the whole meaning behind crypto is cryptography, right?
Hmm.
So I think there's a real passion out there for cryptography and what it brings to blockchain, right?
Interesting.
Because crypto and cryptography is really different than just blockchain in general, right?
Mm.
It is just the gateway to it.
To say, you hear the word crypto a lot. Like when you think, cryptography, like what is the easiest definition of that for anybody listening in when you at its basic in its basic form?
Sure. So if I were to sit there and write out a letter to JR, and then it was just a bunch of mixed up ones, zeros, and letters, and JR was like, I have no idea what this means, right? But if I sent him a key, right, to that, which is the same thing as you guys hear private keys for wallets and all this stuff. It's literally the exact same thing. If I send you a key that says 1 equals A, O equals B, and random letters are in sequences equals C, then you would be able to take that key and you would be able to rewrite that note that I sent you or that letter that I sent you, and you would be able to read it. Well, that is the same way that cryptography works, right? So when you start talking about data and all that stuff that we're sending over blockchain, it literally looks like something jumbled up without having the key to be able to read it. So things are going to become more secure, for one, right? And then the grand scheme of things, everything is literally encrypted going to and from, and the only person that's able to read that is going to be the person sending it and the person receiving it. And if the person that is sending it out didn't want and sending it to the group but only wanted two people to read it, then it would allow that person to sign something within a Web3 or a wallet or some similar model, even outside of crypto, to be able to read that and provide that public key to them to read it one time or 5 times. And again, we go back to programmable stuff, right? So I know a lot of you guys are familiar with like Snapchat. You snap a picture, they get to look at it real quick and it disappears. Well, you have the same ability, but to program that into transactions or photos or information, right? So I kind of got off track there for a little bit, but
Oh, it's okay. It's
there's
good
just so
info.
much to talk about when you
Yeah.
start talking about blockchain, because I think a lot of people just associate blockchain with crypto, and it's
Hmm.
really not, right?
Right. Right.
It's just two things that work well together.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, on the topic of things that work together, obviously you've built you've built a name in this space. You've gained extensive knowledge in the blockchain industry and now the DeFi industry. Um, Tell us about Blockstar and how that came about, and when was that moment in your life where you're like, I want to create the first Facebook-ish experience on blockchain? Like, was it a single moment? Was it done by accident? Like, I think, you fail to hear real quick, you fail to hear, I think in the tech moguls of today's world, right? Which are still very green in the grand scheme of where technology is going to be in the next 50, 100, 200 years.
Sure.
But I feel like you almost forget, or maybe they don't highlight enough where that first concept came from, because one, to me, that is a great segue for people to find that fire in their belly to chase that dream they want to do, or to invent that product, or to immerse themselves in something they've always wanted to build, and then create something from it, right? And I think it could be that trigger point where people are like, hey, this, it's your David story about Blockstar. Like, I feel like that's not highlighted enough. The innovation, the invention, the perseverance, the entrepreneurial side of building big tech, right? You hear big tech and it doesn't have a good ring to it nowadays, right?
Right.
It's just not, it's not what Blockstar is, obviously, and that's why I'm sure another reason you created it. But like, I think it'd be really cool for anybody listening in to like understand, that turning point where you're like, yeah, this is what it's going to become, or was it a gradual thing?
So if I back, it really goes back because a lot of people think it was just going on almost 4 years ago that I created the first part of the code that I ever wrote for Blockstar without the Blockstar name actually happened 12 years ago, right? I
Wow.
initially started writing it out. There was a big transition between MySpace and Facebook, right? I was a big fan
Hmm.
of MySpace and everything, and just kind of what he was doing, and that really piqued my interest in the social media platform or in that space. And everybody just kind of drew a line in the sand, and everybody said, "Oh, Facebook can never make it." And well, look, even though MySpace was kind of the first mover, it ended up being Facebook, right? But everybody drew a line in the sand and said either you love MySpace or you love Facebook. There was no in between. Well, I thought there was an in between, right? And I was like, well, there's certain things I don't like about MySpace that I like about Facebook. There's stuff I don't like about Facebook that I like about MySpace. The ability to go in and write in HTML and change mine and have the coolest profile because I knew how to write in HTML back then, right? That they didn't offer on Facebook, but for the user interface, just for your everyday people, you're going to have more people have the availability to go on there and use it with a better interface on Facebook, right? So I started writing my own code that I thought I can make a better mousetrap, right? I thought I could make a better mousetrap that would fit exactly what I thought that social media should have been, right? Now I had no idea that it would become as popular as it is today, right? Um, so obviously I had a lot of things going on back then. I was trying to build out another business and everything, but that was my hobby. So the first part of the Blockstar code was actually have had to be updated, but it's not like I had to necessarily just go back and start from scratch. The architecture of what I wanted was already there, right? And if any of you guys seen the original version of Blockstar, you're like, wow, this kind of reminds me of the old MySpace and Facebook days. That's because the architect was already built, right? But 4 years ago, I pulled it out of my drawer and said, I'm going to finish this, right? And I'd already been in the crypto space for many years at that point. But I said, I'm going to finish this because it's come a point in the space, especially on the Facebook side. And I have no problem saying this. There came a point in Facebook where the user of the platform became the product of the platform. And everybody's like, well, what does that mean, David? Well, here's what it means. It means that the when we share our information with somebody, we expect that that information is getting shared with the person that we want to share it with. Now, obviously, there's privacy policy and all that that you probably should read, but none of us ever read it. They say, oh, we're going to use the site anyway. It doesn't matter. We got to click OK if we want to be on there, right? That's where all of our friends are. But advertisers started coming along and paying big bucks. And well, Facebook and all these, not just Facebook, I'm picking on them, but all the platforms out there did the same thing. Whoever the highest bidder was, they would just give over that information freely. And that's where they made their billions and billions of dollars was through advertisements and showing things to your front end that you would want to, that maybe you were interested in or did a Google search. And the key to that was that's not a business model that I ever agree with because now the user of that of Facebook is the advertisers. The product of it is the users, right? And that is just the opposite of what I want to convey in Blockstar, right? So the way that we do things in Blockstar is all the advertising dollars that come into Blockstar, yes, we are going to advertise, but you have the option to opt out, right? You don't have to see one single ad on Blockstar, and you never will. All you have to do is opt out of them. However, if you do opt in, the way we've done it is we give a revenue share. So every single ad that you see on the platform, you're actually getting a share of that pool.
So
So
you're
let's
saying everybody that joins Blockstar, just to be clear, everybody that joins has a chance to earn something. Like,
Absolutely. So I'm going to give you an example of that. So
okay.
I always use Coca-Cola. I'm a Coke fan. It's pretty not Diet Coke, just so we're clear here. So when my wife is listening later and she said, I don't like no Diet Coke, she's absolutely right. But let's say Coca-Cola, and I'm going to use simple numbers. I've tried to keep this very simple for everybody out there, not because you guys don't understand, but I think this is a great segue to just kind of get your basis of what blockchain and some of these things are. So let's say that Coca-Cola comes and says, hey, David, here's $1,000. We want to advertise to all the ladies that live out in New York over by the Long Island area. And we want them between the age of 35 and 45, right? So we don't freely give over your information. Matter of fact, we give them absolutely zero information, right? Because we are built on a decentralized platform for a reason. Now they are able to create their campaign and say the people that they want to advertise to, the people that are opted in, they are going to see those ads and the money that we took in. So in this case, that $1,000, we're going to take 80% of it, right? Which in this case is $800. We're going to go and we're going to buy the Blockstar token. right on the contract. So all you investors out there in Blockstar and even the users, this is what happened. It creates a buy order on the contract. It takes those BST tokens and it puts it into an advertising pool. Every single person that qualified for that advertising pool because you met that demographics is going to get dispersed those BST tokens equally, right? Based on, again, the demographics. So you can imagine just with one advertiser doing that. Now let's look at it when there's 1,000, 10,000 advertisers doing that. That adds up very, very quickly. Now you're earning points, right? On the ecosystem itself as well. But in this case, on the advertising pools, you're earning direct BST. So you can imagine with a project like Blockstar, just even outside the social platform, but sticking with it, the social platform, every single user of the platform automatically becomes a holder and in the crypto space because they will hold the BST token. And then you can take that BST token and you can sell it back to fiat. You can sell it for one of our stable coins, or you can trade it for another token that is in our ecosystem. And that's something we'll go over later on when we go back over Blockstar and a future thing. But every single person becomes a holder, and there's not very many projects in the crypto space that can boast that they have 1 million holders, 10 million holders, 1 billion holders. We are an international company. So again, not just the advertising pools, but every time that you go onto Blockstar, you like something, you share something, you upload a product, you are earning points that you can then go exchange those points for the Blockstar token as well, right? And then again, be able to cash out, go back to fiat, or continue to invest those.
So they're earning points separately. So just to be clear for users or viewers, listeners, I can't speak straight. Are they, to be clear, they're earning Blockstar on our BST token on one side of things, but also earning separate points that can be converted to BST token in addition to that?
Correct. Every time that you like, share, comment, subscribe, everything you do inside that ecosystem, you're earning points because you are the user. You need to be rewarded as a user.
That's really remarkable. Like when you think about mass adoption of crypto, right? It's a tough thing to swallow. Being someone that's still relatively new to it in the grand scheme of things compared to someone like yourself, and being a person and being a company now, Ember, who's trying to speak to that audience, right? We're trying to reach out to the private equity guys. We're trying to reach out, and I'm trying. We're in the process of building that whole voice and narrative to the moms, dads, kids of the world that the value of being in this ecosystem, despite all the burning oceans around us, at the moment, that those things can burn because things like Blockstar and obviously, Ember and other great projects out there exist. And I think it's to me a perfect segue for people to on-ramp into DeFi, because they're earning crypto without even really realizing it, just by doing the same daily tasks that they would be doing on Facebook or on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, right? They're liking, commenting, sharing, posting. And to know that they're actually earning something from that is an insanely cool utility. And I don't feel like the the people that I know about blocks, that know about Blockstar, people we've introduced to Blockstar, even realize that yet, and I get that it's beta right now, and that's going to be a big part of the marketing, and voice and narrative we're going to help bring and work with you on. But what a remarkable concept in the grand scheme of things. And it's not to butter your bread here. It's just it's really, we do that enough, but it's really, really cool when you actually break that down. People and businesses and products out in DeFi, they stretch, from what I've seen, to come up with utility, and sometimes it's so fragmented and so obscure, where you're like, okay, I kind of get what you're doing and how that could benefit somebody in 2 years, or maybe not. And it's like they're stretching because people don't break things down to simple elements like that. And anybody, anybody that can join Facebook or join any of these other big tech social networks, are going to be able to join another big tech social network that is allowing them to actually earn something, versus feeling like their privacy is being violated and people are tracing and tracking them. That's remarkable. Anybody listening in, yes, this is not some paid advertisement. We're very deeply connected with David and the Blockstar team, and push you to go and sign up at blockstar.world during this phase of beta testing, so you can see what everything we're talking about and bring context to that. I think it's super important, especially for anybody listening in that's really new to crypto, that's afraid to dabble in altcoins, and they just want to stick with the big guys, the Bitcoin and Ethereum and Litecoin. Use this as your on ramp. Like, use this as a really cool on ramp, and watch your activity grow your crypto. Like that is super cool. I just had to highlight that. That's
Right,
awesome.
I appreciate that. And for any of you guys out there listening and everything that you're not part of the Blockstar ecosystem yet, if you're into NFTs, or maybe you're not into NFTs and you're into just earning, passive reward, we have our staking platform, everything as well. We are a very large ecosystem that is ever growing, right? We have a lot of cool stuff coming out between our decks. We do have what JR likes to call our hex, and there'll be more details coming out very, very soon on that. It's some pretty exciting stuff, especially with everything in the grand scheme of things that are happening in the markets in crypto right now, with some of the stuff that happened with FTX and all that stuff, and Lunar and Celsius and all that. We have a way to eliminate a lot of the what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of the risk involved in trading between a centralized exchange, going back to your bank, and also with a DEX as well. So between a what they call a SEX and also a DEX, there is a hybrid model that I think that we can really scale to a very large level, right? So I don't want to go into too much detail on that now, but there is going to be a time very, very soon. We're going to be looking for some beta testers to get that underway. But if you guys stay tuned for this first quarter this next year, we have a ton of information coming out. We're already a year ahead in development. So the stuff that we're going to be rolling out the first quarter this year, next year, is already done. We're just testing. And then we're already building year 2, 3, and 4 right now as we're speaking. So this is my last project to the space. This is my legacy project. And everybody says, well, what does that mean? Well, I've been in the space so long. I've worked and advised on a ton of other projects, and I'll continue to advise on those. But this is the last project that I would build in this space. So I want to make sure that it gets done correctly. It's done right. So everybody said, well, why the social media part of it, right? Or the social platform? Because this is really a segue for a lot of mass adoption coming into the space, being able to do it securely, safely, being able to learn, because we do have a whole e-learning side of this. So if you're someone out there that's looking to really get into the crypto space or really learn it, we're not asking you to do something that you're not already doing anyway. If you get on Twitter, Facebook, we're just giving you a better way. So don't think that just because it's decentralized that you're getting less options, right? We are on the cutting edge of technology for Blockstar going forward, where all these other companies, to be able to have the same capability that we have now, would almost have to close their business and start over and start developing from day one again, just because it's totally different technology. You can't just go jump on the blockchain and say, oh, we're on blockchain now. We're building Windows. That's not the way it works, right? Blockstar was built with the intention of it being available 50 years from now, 100 years from now, because it can scale very, very quickly with its user base. But also, it gives us a way to teach and really curate that investor that's looking to go into the crypto space. And if you're not looking to, come and enjoy the site anyway. It's 100% free for you guys to use, and it will always be that way. This was built with users in mind. Everything that we do will be free. Obviously, we take in outside money, but we don't take it from our users. We take it from the other companies out there, and we give it back to our users. Now, obviously, as a company, we have to make money, but we aren't making our money off of our users. We're making it directly from the companies that we interact with on a daily basis. They're going to be wanting to advertise on our platform, our NFT marketplace. Again, we have so many utilities out there, and our ecosystem is user centric. That's what the main focus on everything that we do is. How do we make a better user experience? How do we keep their information secure? How do we keep it to where they can come in, learn something safe? They don't have to worry about risk management as much. They can learn how to use exchanges. They can learn how to use the dexes, and then we can continue to move forward and let them get into different aspects. But again, if you don't want anything to do with crypto, come and support the project and everything, because there is so much more beyond in our ecosystem beyond just a social platform, and also beyond crypto in general.
That's so cool. That's so cool. We've had there's key terms that I feel pop in my head that we've seen from some of the beta testers out there, and I think the word familiar comes to mind. So if you haven't checked out Blockstar.world, I definitely would push you to do that. Again, like David said, even if you're not into crypto, it's going to feel familiar, and that's so important in today's day and age. Like beyond a brand strategist or a budding CEO. My background's in user experience, and one of the first things I told David when I went and saw the experience on Blockstar.site versus Blockstar.world, he's probably tired of hearing me say it. Like it was just beautifully done, and I think that's so crucial to onboard people, is make the experience not only feel simple, but if you're able to make it feel familiar. Doing user-centered design is it's not a trivial thing, and you can tell the attention to detail and the research was done to make this a really awesome way to onboard people to crypto. But even beyond that, more importantly, create an ecosystem and create an environment where people can go on, get to know each other, whether they want to be in DeFi or not, and not feel like they've got big tech eyeing in on every single thing they're doing. That it's a security thing, it's a safety thing, it's a peace of mind thing, and rewarding people for viewing ads and rewarding people for just interacting, like absolute brilliance. It's absolute brilliance. So I definitely push you to go check out Blockstar. For those of you that don't know, we're going to be we're blessed to be one of the official agencies that's going to be supporting David and his ecosystem as it grows, and helping to be a creative marketing and front end arm for him to help continue to drive great user experience, great brand growth, and building that voice out in the ecosystem. So be on the lookout. A lot of big stuff coming later this year and early next year on many fronts, and it's going to be a game changer, big time. And I was going to get into future proofing, but I think you already did that. One thing you told me real quick, David, always back, that I found really fascinating, and I wish you could hear this, because you never will, from the Mark Zuckerbergs or the Jack Dorseys of the world, right? You said at some point, once it's like out there really living and published, that at some point you release some level of ownership of it or something along those lines. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So right now, we do have nodes in our ecosystem that this platform runs on. It's not just running on one or two servers somewhere. It is literally on blockchains, and we are using nodes to create that blockchain. So right now, we do have nodes that are not for sale now. We did have a sale of nodes, and those node owners are rewarded. They're not rewarded in BST. They're actually rewarded as a percentage of the revenue that the company takes in. So you never have to worry about those tokens being sold directly back onto the market and hurting its investors. So we will have to continue to open up rounds of nodes where we do sell more nodes. I do have the majority share of the nodes, so I'm able to make unilateral decisions. But as soon as we open up that next round of nodes, I lose complete authority. And we do have smart contracts. You guys heard me talk about those earlier. So those are programmed. So I have to have it's a consensus model as well. So I have to have the majority vote to even get a cryptography key to even be able to go in and make changes, because that key changes every 24-hour period. So if I need a 72-hour window to make any changes to the ecosystem, I have to ask for approval for that. All those node owners would have to vote. I would have to get approval, have the majority share, and then go through and be able to make those changes and everything. And then it locks me out of the system.
How's that for a big middle finger to big tech? That is remarkable. Like that is future proofing. Like that is thinking like light years ahead on how big technology should be managed, but doing it the right way. Like I have a heart of a technologist and the mind of a creative. So like I get the tech side, right? And I even understand a lot of it, but blockchain is still like this evolving thing. But like take all that aside, right? You don't have to understand how it works. You don't have to understand how even nodes work to realize the value in everything that he just said came full circle. When you, like he said, you get back to the cryptography, and you get back, as he's talking about nodes and how it's all in smart contracts, it's all intertwined, it's all connected, and the architecture and the philosophy behind it is what's so intriguing. So if you guys have any interest in learning blockchain, hands down, I advise respectfully, give him some time to respond. Reach out to David if you're in our Telegram. He's one of the most friendly funny, engaging people you'll ever talk to. I really have enjoyed every single conversation I've ever had with him on and offline. I mean, you feel like you're just learning something every day because not everybody specializes in this space. And it's not to brown nose David. It's not to put him on a pedestal or, as he said, to talk arrogantly or anything like that. But you find yourself, as I did in this space in Ember, where and I mentioned this to him the other day in just a private conversation. I was like, I totally thought this was going to be different. We came off the coattails of a failed project, and it was scary to want to start over, right? And getting into this, it was like, we don't talk about that much, but it was like, what am I going to experience? Are we going to go through troubles again? Are there going to be bad actors constantly trying to come after us and, go after my identity or whatever? It's like you try not to go in with fear, and then you find yourself surrounded by friends that become family. And if it, I'm telling you, it is a space that I never want to leave. I actually had a conversation with a client that came by my house today, and he was like, "Have you enjoyed watching Ember?" And I was like, it's had its ups and downs, as you can imagine. I think family is a great word, as it popped up on my screen from Kelly, one of our team leads. It is family. It absolutely is friends and family. I was telling a client that came by today, I was like, I don't ever want to work in another industry. Like that's a profound thing for someone like me to say, who's still young in my career. I'm 39, been at this for 18 years in the grand scheme of things, but I'm still young in my career, and knowing like I found my home. I get why, and David's reiterated and reinforced, like crypto and DeFi and blockchain doesn't have to be this like dark web, black hole, black alley ecosystem. It's fun. It should be fun. You should be enjoying yourself. And I find myself doing that more and more every day, despite the uphill battle in a red market. Right. So,
That's right.
um,
If you're not having a good time, you're not doing it right.
amen. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I can't, if you've heard anything today, hear it from a testimony from yours truly that I came into this very skeptical, very green, I mean, just overall concerned. Am I making the right leap in my career? And I'm on the front end. I'm on the marketing. I'm on brand. I'm not even doing the super cool, like real stuff. I just make it look good. So anybody that's interested in the space, interested in learning blockchain, I highly, highly recommend you get to know David or people like David. Just immerse yourself, as he said. Don't go just learn HTML and JavaScript and traditional development language. Go immerse yourself in Solidity. It's something I've actually looked into to introduce it to some of our team members and see if they have interest in learning it. And I think it's something that it's going to change the path. It's going to change the course of where businesses grow, where people interact, how people spend their money, how people earn their money. It is the future, and we're really on the early cusp of that. So with that said, David, um, you know, uh, ideally in the future, not even ideally, I think there's sometimes we're going to do some of these where we have a live audience and we can field some questions. Is there any other, without having questions really to field at this point? Are there any are there any final points you want to make about the space, whether it be your enjoyment or things people can do to get started, or
Sure.
resources or anything like that you'd like to share? Any couple of tidbits?
Yep. Number one, change your mindset, change your paycheck. I'll tell everybody that
Amen.
to the end there. But all you guys and everything that are again that are looking to learn the space and really learn blockchain and smart contracts. That's why I suggest you start, because it's going to give you a leap and bounds ahead movement compared to learning some of the older technology. Not that it's old now, but it's going to become obsolete, and
Hmm.
Solidity is the future, right? That is what's going to be the future of not just blockchain and cryptocurrency, but also as we know it in traditional markets as well in business. So that's why I recommend. And JR said a bunch of kind words and everything, and I never take that stuff, just as him just bragging on me and everything, as I appreciate those words and everything, but I never get too big for my britches. And what I mean by that, I'm probably one of the most humble guys you will meet out there.
Amen.
So anytime that you guys want to reach out, I am super, super busy. I always take the time to respond to everybody within 24 hours, right? Because I didn't make it in this space alone, and nobody else can either. So I'm super happy to help you guys when I have the time, but I will respond to your messages. It's been super great working with JR and Matt and his whole entire team. So I know they talk a lot of good stuff about me, but honestly, without guys like like their team, specifically Ember and Ember Agency and everything, I couldn't fulfill my dream and my goals within inside of Blockstar. Now, there's other people that are involved in that as well, and other projects that have been brought into the Blockstar ecosystem to help work behind the scenes and everything. And it's a shout out to those guys as well, because I'm only one guy. I can only do so much on my own, right? And that's why I've handpicked the people that are part of that Blockstar team, because without them, I can't do everything that I want to do in the future. And if I could, it's going to look a lot different. I'm not a designer. I'm not an adult color. I can't go and create things. I want to do what I focus on, right? And what
Yeah.
I'm good at is architecture. I'm good at developing things. I'm good at the business side of it. My dream goal is not to go hold these podcasts and AMAs. I know a lot of you guys know I love to talk, or at least you think I do, but I lose my voice half the time. But mine is just sharing a wealth of knowledge out there that I've had in the space, and I'm willing to share it with everybody out there that's willing to learn it too. And I know there's a lot of other great developers out there, or just people in general in this space, that are happy to share their thoughts. There's always going to be shadowy, bad, dark characters in this space, but that's in any industry out there, right? So pick and choose the people that you want to work with. But again, like JR said, it's if you're not having fun in crypto, then you're not doing it right. And I'll leave you on that thought. It truly is a remarkable space. You're going to meet people from all over the world. It's not like you're just meeting somebody from down the road or whatever. It opens up cultural boundaries, and that's the best part about crypto. It opens up so many doors and windows. I would have never met a lot of the people from the Ember Agency or guys over in the UK like Mark and Toby, and I can name 1,000 other people that I've met throughout the years in this space that have really changed my perspective, not just on crypto and blockchain and what I'm doing, but also cultural lines, right? But between people and everything, there's so many things. Even though I've been pretty well traveled with the Navy and everything, I was never there long enough to really get to know different cultures and aspects of people's lives. And I've enjoyed every single minute. And you can nearly find me every single day in this space because I do what I love. I've been fortunate enough outside of crypto where I don't have to have a traditional job to go to every single day. This is a space I love. This is a space I enjoy, and I'll continue to be in it for the foreseeable future. So
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, and I
yeah.
appreciate the kind words. Being a pretty green person in this space, I've got a lot to learn, and I definitely anxious to learn from the best here. So again, as David said, challenge you guys to hop into Telegram, hop into Blockstar .world. Make sure you go and check out the rest of his ecosystem. We're gonna have more and more information coming out about that in the next next month and a half, and definitely into 2023. So with that said, I just want to thank you guys for listening in on today's podcast. In the volatile world of DeFi, we are the constant. We have a relentless, unapologetic commitment to excellence for our team, our clients, and our investors. On behalf of Ember Agency and Ember Token, I invite you to tune in next week for episode 4 as we get to hang with the gang. We get to have our very first mod night. This is our team. These are our mods. These are the people that you get to interact with on a daily basis. And it's just going to be a super fun, chill, laid back hangout where we get to talk, and we're going to invite the community in to join us.